the series of press briefings, and we continue to talk about Crimea, which is outside coalition agreement. And now Andriy Schekun, Sergiy Kovalskyi, and Sergiy Mokryniuk will share their ideas about that. And these are people from Euromaidan-Crimea NGO. Good afternoon, Andriy Schekun. You know that today the process of forming new coalition is taking place. Unfortunately, we have analyzed the agreements declared by Народный Front or Poroshenko's bloc. There's not a single item about Crimea there. Maybe they're doing something now, and as they declare, maybe they will sign something. But we decided to join in this process and provide some of our proposals to this agreement and lobby it. What is important now, and these are our proposals which are approved by both Crimeans who are on the temporary occupied territory, by the Kiev Patriarchy, and also by people who are now on the continental part of Ukraine, those people who have more tolerant position of protecting the rights of the internally displaced people. And now Sergiy Kovalskyi and Sergiy Mokryniuk will say a little more about which issues we would like to raise. The main thing is to new coalition. We do hope that the new coalition will do something. Unfortunately, there's no systemic work done on returning the Crimea, and there's not a single body set up for that. To the MPs of Ukraine, to political party Народный Front, to political party Petro Poroshenko bloc, to political party Samopomich, to political party Radical Party of Leshko, to political party Ukrainian Association Batkivshina. The statement: we, people from Crimea, the representatives of public and religious organizations of Crimea, the citizens of Ukraine, welcome with free democratic elections. We congratulate you with being elected as MPs, and with the fact that your political forces are now in the Parliament of Ukraine. At the same time, we are concerned with the text of coalition agreement, where there's nothing about addressing the issue of temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. There are no provisions in the agreements about the future of Crimea. We believe that renewal of territorial integrity of Ukraine and returning the Crimea to Ukraine should become the national idea and the main task of not just the President of Ukraine, the new coalition, but the new parliament and the government of Ukraine. We address the representatives of the future coalition. We address those who are planning to become part of coalition in the parliament, who participate in negotiations, review the coalition agreement of the political parties, and add the section about Crimea to that. The following items especially, according to the law of Ukraine on ensuring the rights and freedoms of the citizens and the legal regime on the temporary occupied territory of Ukraine during 15 days, to set up the special central body of central authorities on issues of temporary occupied territories of Ukraine, which should take the task of strategic planning and ensuring and providing state mechanisms as to returning the Crimea, and set up the ministry on the issues of Crimea, to delegate to the government during 60 days from the time when the body is set up to develop the strategy of returning the Crimea and to submit it for approval to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, to cancel the law of Ukraine on creating the free economic zone Crimea, and on the specific features of conducting economic activities on the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine, to put the personal responsibility on the newly appointed Prime Minister of Ukraine for implementing the law of Ukraine on ensuring the rights and freedoms of IDPs, with the hope that this law will be signed by the President during 30 days to set up the mechanism on ensuring and protection of the rights of the citizens of Ukraine who are on the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. Also to pass the law of Ukraine on the status of Crimean Tatar people as the indigenous people of Ukraine, to create the interfaction group in the Parliament of Ukraine on Crimea, to create the public council on issues of temporarily occupied territory of Crimea under the Cabinet of Ministers and under the Parliament of Ukraine, to create the State Information Center Crimea, to ensure, we request to ensure rights and freedoms of the people from Crimea on the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine, Crimea. With respect, Archbishop Clement of Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchy, Andriy Schekun, Sergiy Kovalskyi, and Sergiy Mokryniuk. I would like to give more details. Item 1, which is in the law of Ukraine on occupied territories, and we know that that was passed in May. Unfortunately, according to that, the law recommends to the Cabinet of Ministers to set up the special body on Crimea, but it hasn't been done yet. We know that we, back in July, had a round table on that. It was on setting up the ministry on Crimea. All the representatives of different factions, including those which are in the parliament now, they supported this initiative. In 2 days, we saw the resolution of the government on setting up not the ministry, but the state service on Crimea, but unfortunately, it hasn't been created yet. There were some competitions and selections, but unfortunately, we don't have a single body which would systemically work on economic, environmental, financial, banking issues, and other issues. And so the situation is that all these laws and resolutions, they contradict each other. And how to do that, the authorities do not know. So this issue is quite shameful because the Russian Federation has done that within 1 week, and they integrate Crimea into their legal and economic environment and space. And second thing, and it's on developing the strategy of returning Crimea. We need to mention that this task should first of all be the task of this body. We need to work systemically on the issues of Crimea. We would like to thank the international community, which has done a lot about that. Ukraine, the newly elected parliament, should get engaged into that and should start their work on that. And Sergiy Mokryniuk will say a few more words.
According to the Constitution, the guarantor of the state sovereignty and the territorial integrity, the President of Ukraine. And today, it has been recognized that the Crimea, at least, is an occupied territory, occupied by a foreign state. Over a period of 9 months since the date of occupation, we can recognize today that the state did not take almost any steps which would prove that they understand the state level what to do with the Crimea, how to return back to Ukraine. There are some declarations, like relative statements, but no actions. There is no state institutions which would take care of this issue. And the most important, there is no strategy of the state policy regarding the issue of the Crimea. Today, our country has not yet decided what we have to do with the Crimea, how we are going to return back to Ukraine, and who specifically is going to be responsible for those issues, what resource can be used, and what ways to follow. There are no answers to those questions, but there is regulatory, some regulatory acts which we can say that they push the Crimean people and the citizens of Ukraine, in fact, to sever their ties with Ukraine and to strengthen their links or ties with the Russian Federation. We believe it's not normal, it's even shameful. Speaking about the creation of the free trade zone in Crimea, this law what actually resulted in the first of all the citizens of Crimea, the Ukraine who live in the Crimea, they were recognized not no more than citizens of Ukraine, which is not correct. And we have to feed the Russian troops which are now stationed in Ukraine in such a way that it should not be subject to taxation. We believe it's abnormal. This is our own state policy. We would like to hear how Ukraine is going to do something about that. Responsibility lies today, by all means, on the shoulders of the President of Ukraine as a guarantor of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity, and also responsibility lies with the future Prime Minister. That's why we come up with this statement and declaration, so the certain aspects could be taken into consideration when they're going to sign the would be coalition. We talked about that a lot during the first briefings. I believe we can switch over to the Q&A session. I have the following question. Have you already had any negotiations with some of the politicians of Ukraine before actually reading out this statement? Well, in fact, we had some talks or meetings before the parliamentary elections with the most high-ranking representatives of most high-ranking parties regarding the possibility or opinion to hear us what has to be done about Crimea today, and in the issues how the people have to represent the different candidates for the parliament from different parties. I really don't want to name those parties we had negotiated with. They are represented today in the parliament, but they did not hear us. And we actually lost 12 majority constituents in the Crimea. What we planned, they did not do anything about that. And we do not have any real mechanism of influence, but Mustafa Jamilev, this is the only person who can do anything. He really takes it to close to his heart what's going on in the Crimea. Yeah, I don't know. You know the rebel situation, and we are talking about the different ideas like Lershko, and I can understand why they were taken actually elected to the parliament. There is a problem. Nobody hears us, and when the latest law was adopted in September about the free zone, and now we have a new law. We are not recognized any longer as the residents. We are the foreigners, and this also had a great negative impact on those people who are now in inland Ukraine who tried to help the Crimea, not only the Crimean residents. Any more questions? Yeah, there is a question from the audience. Alexander Krivenko, lawyer, journalist, law protection activist. I really would like to know whether you concentrated your attention on the free economic zone in the Crimea. Have you done anything about recognition of this law as non-constitutional? Are there any legal conclusions, or have you studied those political groups or find it very useful to them? Well, actually, we were talking about that a lot of time. We had some press conferences, and actually we had some marches and in demonstrations. We are going to do something about lodging the plea with the court, but we understand that the most instrumental way today is to do something with the members of the parliament. We understood that we couldn't do anything with the old composition of the parliament. We do realize the situation available today, so we address this new formed coalition. It's easier to us through the parliament just to annul, to cancel that law. This is our position. Well, speaking about who it is advantageous, this is the beneficial advantage to the oligarchs who have their property in Crimea, and they lobbied this issue in order to become even more rich in the future. And those people who live in the Crimea, they became the foreigners from the point of view of the banking system in Ukraine. This is my answer to your question. If there are no more questions, thanks a lot to you. As I mentioned before, after the conclusion of the first briefing, we do expect the representatives of the parties who made it to the parliament. The next week we are going to talk about the coalition. We are going to raise the issue of the Crimea and speaking whether this issue was entered in the coalition agreement or not. Thank you very much.